Good day, ladies and gentlemen. This is Point Counterpoint with Hype, with me, Charlie, and Pastor Gary, who will be visible in just a moment. Today our episode's going to be on law and order. We're going to talk about some people from law and order, and we're going to play a quick clip. Now, Gary's going to spin this thing around so that we can see who Gary is. And let me start out with thanking Bards FM and Scott for starting this discussion with this clip that we have downloaded. Gary has downloaded, and would like you folks to hear this clip about law and order and the evil cabal that's trying to take over the country. So, Pastor Gary, if you would key up Bard FM Scott, and let's listen to that for a second, folks.
Strong. And getting your sheriffs to stand up and start having a backbone and not just the will of the people. You know what? In the county level, a sheriff can ensure that people have the right of free will and choice, as he should. But when the state starts to encroach constitutionally on the space of the county, the sheriff has to draw that line. Because in a strange way, the sheriff becomes the executive of our local community. It's important to understand that. If you really look at how that's structured, the executive branch at a county is led by the sheriff. He's an elected official, an elected law enforcement official, but an elected official. And he has the power of posse comitatus, which is the power to mobilize a militia. So let's dig into Federalist Paper number 71, the duration of office of the executive.
There you go.
Okay. So starting off there's 67 counties in the state of Pennsylvania, and one or two of them have changed their county codes so that the sheriff is not elected. He's appointed by the county executive.
All right, so when did that change?
Well, I definitely believe that should be, it probably should be illegal, but it definitely changes the who the sheriff owes his allegiance to. He then owes his allegiance to the county executive. And interestingly enough, the county executive, even in the counties where the sheriff is elected, doesn't make any difference where he's elected or appointed. For some reason, the county executive isn't responsible for enforcing the law and and the statistics having to do with crime. You take a city of the first class like Philadelphia. If crime is running rampant in Philadelphia under normal circumstances, and today it's not normal circumstances, the media is ignoring this. In the past, if crime, any type of specific crime, not crime in general, were to blow up in the city, the media and the citizens would hold the mayor of the city of Philadelphia responsible. He's responsible. He's the number one elected official. He appoints and hires the commissioner of the city of Philadelphia. So the people, city council, the mayor, the city council, and the people, the media, would be banging on the table demanding the mayor do something with his police chief to do something about crime.
Right.
In all of these counties where the county executive appoints the sheriff, nobody's banging on the table asking the county executive what he's doing about crime.
Right.
They should be. And in the counties where the sheriff is elected in Pennsylvania, it is unfortunate, but there's been a lot of legislation reducing the power of the sheriff. And
isn't the sheriff guarding our constitutional rights?
Well, yes, it is in just about every other state except Pennsylvania.
Oh, wow.
In Pennsylvania, there's been legislation consistently eliminating or not mentioning the sheriff when it comes to enforcing the law. And I think that's wrong. The sheriff is the number one law enforcement officer in the county, and I think with that in mind, the Constitution of the state of Pennsylvania says the sheriff is the number one law enforcement officer. I think passing legislation that eliminates the sheriff or precludes him from performing those duties should be considered illegal or should be repealed. Now, with that said, let's move into a police officer, a sheepdog, who is just retiring now. He's not retiring from law enforcement. He retired from the Philadelphia Police Department several years ago, and he's been running the a health and welfare program for the Fraternal Order of Police since he retired. His name is Bob Hurst. I knew Bob vaguely. We weren't friends. We were acquaintances. I knew him. He was in a unit in Philadelphia called Stakeout. And in the Stakeout unit, there was another unit called the Granny Squad. And he was Granny. He would dress up like an old man or a bum or an insurance adjuster or an old lady like a granny. And he would go out on the street and attempt to get mugged. He wouldn't do anything overt. He would just act like a victim. Right? He would present, and that's difficult for a macho guy to go out there and present a persona that he's a victim, that he's afraid of everything, is really a gift. Here's a picture of him when he was acting as either a bum or an insurance agent.
Looks like a bum.
Well, or an insurance agent.
Yeah, either one.
Well, insurance agents, you folks have to understand, if you don't live in the big city, if you don't live in the hood in the big city, and they may not be doing this anymore because of computers, even though the Biden administration doesn't believe people who live in the hood, people of ethnicities, black people or Latino people, have the intelligence to operate a computer or have any identification. That's why they don't need identification to vote, because they're too dumb to get it, based upon the Biden administration. Yeah. So back then, insurance agents or insurance collectors had what was called a debit. They would go into the neighborhood on payday,
Knock on
your door, and
make a payment.
That's right, a small monetary payment to keep your life insurance or your death benefit insurance or whatever insurance that you were buying.
Now, I remember that as a kid.
Yeah.
They used to knock on the door. My mom would get a coupon and pay for the insurance.
A couple bucks.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, the debit could involve several hundred houses, knocking on doors. And, of course, quite often the insurance agent knew where the guys spent their days and would go to the local bar and find the guys in the local bar and be able to get the money right off the bar counter to take care of the insurance for the family.
Right.
I know back in the old days, my grandmother used to go to the local bar on payday and get my great-grandfather out of the bar and bring him home before he spent all of his hard-earned money at the bar. But that's a family problem.
Yeah.
So anyway, Hurst retired from the Philadelphia Police Department years ago. But to give you a background on this hero, he is a hero. To give you a background, and an unassuming guy. He really is a very unassuming guy. Here's a picture of him now.
Oh, wow.
And I would like to thank the Philadelphia Police Department's retired association. This is out of a newspaper called the News Shield. And this came from the Retired Police Association. So what do we have here? Well, Hurst, he's 65. He did 4 tours in Vietnam.
Wow.
You hear that, folks? He did 4 tours
And a tour
in Vietnam.
2 years, right?
Well, it's usually a year.
Okay.
Yeah. So he did 4 years in Vietnam,
Okay.
maybe 9 months a year. He did 4 tours in a combat zone. That's what he did. He was a stakeout cop in the late 60s, all the way up into the 80s. And he served 3 terms as president of the Fraternal Order of Police. He was the head of the state's Bureau of Narcotics Investigations and ran the Fraternal Order of Police's dental and optical and prescription fund until he finally hung up his shield.
Mm-hmm.
Hearst documented 278 times. What do you think 278 times? What do you think they were as a cop in stakeout?
Bank robbery.
No? Think they were arrests?
Oh, it could be arrest, yeah.
Could be, but it's not. He was beaten, stabbed, stoned, or set on fire 278 times.
Oh, wow.
You hear that, ladies and gentlemen? This guy's a sheepdog.
Mm-hmm.
He was beaten, stabbed, stoned. Well, stoned. Actually, he was bricked.
Okay. Right.
Yeah.
Yes, stone has a different meaning.
Yeah, he was bricked. They used the word stone. No, it was bricked. Yeah, you don't get hurt if somebody throws a stone at you, but you do if somebody bricks you.
Yeah.
And the chimneys and the walls in Philly, yeah, a brick. He was bricked.
Mm-hmm.
All right? Stoned or bricked, set on fire. Yeah, he was set on fire. His crew would try to get to him as the assault started, but again, the police can't act or react until somebody acts. So the police are always kind of like behind the 8 ball, and Bob Hearst was at the epicenter of the assault. So he's not being robbed until there's an overt act. And that overt act 278 times was that somebody punched him, beat him, stabbed him, bricked him, or set him on fire. All right? Some interesting highlights. Now, today, Black Lives Matter, Antifa, the secular progressive left-wing wacko Democratic Party, the district attorney of the city of Philadelphia, Krasner, the crazy mayor of Philadelphia, who said one time when a guy dressed in Muslim garb walked up to the door of a police car, shouted Allah Akbar, shot the policeman 3 times and ran away, that was not a terrorist incident. That was not a terrorist incident. That's what
was it?
I don't know. I don't know, because that is the definition of what I would call a terrorist incident.
Yeah.
Yes, but the police, and in the background, Commissioner Ross was standing in the background, and I laughed because the mayor, Kenny, he's a moron. Personal opinion, a moron. No, ladies and gentlemen, this guy dressed in Arab garb, yelling Allah Akbar as he shot the policeman, that was not a terrorist incident. And right behind him, Commissioner Ross went like this. He rolled his eyes. And if Ross ever hears this program, I had to laugh, Commissioner, because you rolled your eyes. I thought your eyes were going to fall right out of their sockets. You rolled them when the mayor made that ridiculous, it's not a terrorist incident. No, it wasn't. I mean, these people they live in Disney World. They really do. Yeah. They really live in Disney World. Everything that they say is a made-up thing. It has no bearing on reality. If Hearst was working today, he would not be permitted to do what he did back then.
How come? Entrapment?
No, there was no entrapment. He would not be permitted to. Wait till you read. I read the statistics, and he would not be permitted to do what he did then. Everything he did was legal. It was justifiable. It was necessary to control the criminal element in our society. Mm-hmm. You cannot control the criminal element in our society by turning them loose, Bruce. You can't open the prison gates and let them out.
Well, that's what they're doing.
What you're doing is you're organizing a civilian army of thugs. That's what you're doing. You're turning them loose so that they can vote and work for the government to suppress legal people who complain. Because that's what Hugo Chavez did in Venezuela. That's what Hitler did. They formed their own civilian army of thugs. And then they took over the police departments, and that's what they're trying to do. That's what the federal government is trying to do. Federalize police departments. Police departments are ineffective. Look at the riots in all of these cities, and the police departments couldn't control them. Oh, we want those cities to sign consent decrees that they'll operate under the rules of the Attorney General and the Justice Department. Now they're under the control of the federal government. So I'm going to read you his statistics. And then, based upon today's philosophy on how policing should be, remember, we have people who are advocating defunding the police. Let's be honest, folks. It's defunding. It's taking money and facilities away from the police and giving it to social service and welfare organizations. And you think that that's going to impress hardcore criminals? It is vilifying police officers for taking aggressive action. It is arresting police officers for assault and turning loose the people who assaulted them. That's what's going on today. So what did Bob Hurst do? Well, when he was on the street making himself a target by disguising himself as an old man or woman or mild-mannered insurance collector, he kept a scrapbook that included newspaper accounts of 22 people he and members of his decoy team had shot. Now, could you picture today a police officer being allowed to work the street who had shot 22 people? What do you think, Gar? You think a police officer would be working the street today who had shot 22 people?
No.
You shoot one person, you're on administrative duty until the cows come home. In the 1980 article, in that scrapbook, he personally had killed 10 weapons-wielding assailants. Huh? The members of his decoy team shot 22 people, and he personally killed 22 weapons-wielding assailants. He and his partners arrested 1,600 robbery suspects. That's unbelievable. That is unbelievable. 1,600 violent felons. What's a robbery? What's the definition of a robbery?
Definition of robbery?
Yeah.
Taking something that does not belong to you.
That's theft. What's a robbery?
You get caught.
No. A robbery is theft with force.
Oh, okay. Theft, of course.
If I steal something from you and don't use any force, I'm stealing. It's a theft.
Right.
If I steal something with you by bricking you, that's robbery.
Okay.
That's theft with force.
Okay.
He arrested 1,600 robbery suspects. That's 1,600 felons who had no problem trying to use force to steal stuff from him or somebody else. He was hospitalized about 36 times. He's he hospitalized 36 times.
Wow.
I was hospitalized twice. Twice. One time I was hospitalized because I was stabbed, and the other time I was hospitalized because I was trying to arrest a drunk, and he was getting ready to punch me, and I beat him to the punch, so to speak, and his tooth went through my skin and infected my hand.
Oh, wow.
And I had blood poisoning going up my arm. Both times I was taken to and admitted to the city's hospital, Philadelphia General Hospital, that doesn't exist anymore. And both times, years apart, my wife was pregnant with 2 of our children. And the first time she came to the hospital with my mother, and I was laying in bed because I had been stabbed in the arm, And the nurse came in, pardon me, and said, "Mrs. Hentz, when are you due?" And my wife said, "Any day now. Any day now." And the nurse said, "Mrs. Hentz, please go home. You don't want to have your child in this hospital." That's the hospital I was being treated in. Yeah.
Wow.
The time I was in there for blood poisoning, it was going up my arm and it reached my elbow. I was in there 3 days and hadn't seen a doctor yet. I went out into the hallway, and these doctors came down the hallway wearing their flowing white coats.
Yeah.
And I said, "Are you a doctor?" He says, "Yeah." I said, "I have blood poisoning. See this blue line going up my arm? And this is infected, and I haven't been treated yet." And very haughtily, he said, "I'm not your physician." Well, I grabbed him by the throat and drug him into the ward and said, "You are now."
So did you have all your children at the General Hospital?
Did I what?
Have your children there?
Turn my hearing up so I can hear you.
Oh, okay.
This was a police and fire ward.
I mean, did you have your children
My children?
in that hospital?
No, my wife didn't. She followed the nurse's instructions and boogied on down. She left.
All
She
right.
went home.
Okay.
So, folks, Bob Hurst, he was in the hospital a dozen times. He had concussions from being bricked 3 or 4 times. He was an amazing servant of the public.
Mm-hmm.
It took 1,600 violent felons off the street. Felons today that would be released from prison without bail.
Mm-hmm.
The guy was amazing. He still is amazing. If he was here today, I'd give him a hug.
Mm-hmm.
He's retiring. He's 65 years old. He's a lot younger than me. He did unbelievable work. He's got the guts to walk around dressed as an old woman or an old man, waiting for somebody to hit you in the head with a brick, waiting for someone to set you on fire, waiting for somebody to assault you. And he apparently did it 1,600 times.
Wow.
Ladies and gentlemen, the man's a hero.
Mm-hmm.
He is an absolute hero.
Wow.
And today I'd like to talk about another hero. That hero was Officer Jimmy O'Connor, badge number 8162 in Philadelphia.
Mm.
He was a 23-year veteran of the Philadelphia Police Department. Let me just tell you folks something. What's a policeman? Who is a policeman? What is he? He goes to the police academy for 20 weeks. He puts on this blue uniform. He carries a gun to protect you? Nah, he carries that gun to protect himself. Think about that. He carries that gun to protect himself. And then he goes out there on the street and he tries to do good.
Mm-hmm.
And when things happen, like the World Trade Center, 9/11, catastrophic things, when you see the sheep, the average citizen running away, you see these guys in blue running toward. Well, what is a police officer? He's your brother. He's your son. He's your daughter. He's your father. He's your grandfather. He's your next door neighbor. He's the guy that goes to the confessional if he's a Catholic. He's the guy Sunday that's sitting in the pew in front of you or next to you or behind you, praying to the same God that you're praying to. He went to the same high school you went to. He went to the same college you went to. He goes to the same drugstore, the same food store, the same automobile mechanic that you do. His cars break down. His children get sick. He has a mortgage. He has religion or he doesn't have religion. He gets up every day and he goes out and he risks his life to make your life safer. He's no different than you on the outside. Regardless of his skin color, his ethnicity, where he grew up, what country he came from. He's not black. He's not dark brown. He's not light brown. He's not white. He's actually blue. He goes to the police academy and he swears that he's going to uphold the law and protect you. And he tries the best in his limited abilities to do that, to try to get through 20 years without being killed. His wife and children never know when they see Daddy walking out the door, getting in the car to go to work, if Daddy is coming home 8 hours later.
Yeah.
And when he comes home 8 hours later, after having been in a violent fight or a chase where they apprehended somebody, where his heart was pumping and his maybe has a headache because of the adrenaline. Most of you people go through your entire lives and never have the problem with adrenaline. When the adrenaline is pumping through your system and then the incident is over and you have to write a report about it, and you can't write the report yet because your hands are shaking so much from the tension and the adrenaline and the chemicals pumping through your system, and you're alive. Back in the day when we smoked, when you're alive and you could lean against the wall and wipe the tears out of your eyes and the sweat off of your brow and have a cigarette to try to calm yourself down, to have a cup of coffee and sit down and compose yourself. You folks out there, that happen to you every day? Once a day, once a week, once a month, anytime this year? Probably not. You understand that, folks? So these people we call police officers are just like you, and then not. They run towards the sound of gunfire. They run towards the sound of people screaming. They run towards the sound of people yelling, "He shot me. He's got a gun. He stabbed me. He's got a knife." The average person runs away, ducks down behind the bench, down behind the car, around the corner. The police officer gets out of his car and runs towards the incident. That's who he is. But he's your father, your brother, your uncle, your cousin, your grandfather, your neighbor. You went to school with him. You go to church with him. He's the same as you, only there's something inside. And it doesn't make any difference what color he is. There is no systemic racism in the police department. If my partner happens to be black, it's not a problem. If my partner happens to be dark brown, light brown, it's not a problem. They talk about systemic racism. What, you think these black police officers are systemically racist? Against who? Black people? Black police officers have to live too, you know. When they put the gun in the locker and go home, where do they go home to? Now, in this country, they can go home to any neighborhood they can afford to live in. So the neighborhood doesn't have to be black. It doesn't have to be in the hood. The black police officer, white police officer, Latino police officer can live any place they can afford. My neighbor could be anything of any ethnicity, and he could be a cop. As a matter of fact, my two neighbors were police officers, the same as I was.
Oh, wow.
And my buddy across the street that worked in the same district that I worked in, he was in our neighborhood. Most of the people were cops and firemen. We could afford that type of house in that neighborhood. They were cops and firemen. Were they any different than my Jewish neighbor on the other side? No. No, they weren't. They're all human beings. They all have blood coursing through their veins. They all have religious and ethical situations. So police officers are just like you. So here we have Jimmy O'Connor. His badge number was 8162. You people out there watching this don't know who he was. Never heard his name. You know who George Floyd was, though, right? Mm-hmm. But you don't know who Jimmy O'Connor was. Jimmy O'Connor was a 23-year veteran of the Philadelphia Police Department. He was a corporal in Stakeout, SWAT. That's Special Weapons and Tactics. So after all of the training he got as a Philadelphia police officer, and after he got some experience on the street, he put in for Special Weapons and Tactics. Mm-hmm. Special Weapons and Tactics do a lot of interesting things. During a political function, say when the President of the United States is attending a function, say at the convention center, SWAT would set up snipers all around with spotters. And they would watch the area to make sure there weren't any hostile attempts with long-distance shooting at the dignitary. They would provide counterfire. SWAT has Special Weapons and Tactics. Used to have we called them wagons. It was a van loaded with vests and ammunition and different types of firearms and implements to be used in a shootout. So if there was a weapons confrontation, an extended weapons confrontation, and a weapons confrontation that wasn't over in 30 seconds with somebody being shot down on the ground, if it evolved a hostage situation or a barricaded person with a weapon, SWAT would go there, and SWAT would pretty much take the lead on how to handle that. They had bigger, more bullet-resistant vests than the average police officer wears because they got into more heavily armed situations. SWAT used to serve felony warrants. And that's how Jimmy O'Connor met his demise. He was serving a warrant on a homicide suspect in the 15th District when he was shot and killed. Oh. He had 23 years on the job. He has a wife and children just like most people do. And Jimmy O'Connor is a fallen hero. God bless him.
Today, Governor DeSantis in Florida for 200 years made this statement. For 200 years, sheriffs have been keeping our communities safe. Today, the Florida cabinet passed a resolution thanking them for 2 centuries of selfless service.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Point Counterpoint with Hype with Charlie and Pastor Gary. If you'd like to donate to this program, go to WHRFM.com. You hit the donate button. You'll actually be donating to Dare to Be Different Food Pantry, which Pastor Gary runs. He provides food for the folks up here in Upper Mount Bethel in this region. If you have any calls, any complaints, any comments, give us a call at 848-480-6371. And until the next time, keep your back to the wall and your powder dry. God bless.